What's really going on behind the BTS reunion in Los Angeles? Why did Jungkook choose not to attend? And why was Taeyong cited as the cause? Now, Jin finally spoke up and leaked a sensitive conversation that left the armies around the world speechless. Los Angeles that night was filled with unusual light. Between the city lights and the noise that never sleeps, there was a reunion that was supposed to be a warm moment for BTS fans around the world. However, it is precisely from this reunion that a big question mark begins to grow. Why did Jungkook, who is known to be always present for his Hyung, not show up? And why did Taeyong's name suddenly burst out in the middle of the fans' conversation? Jin, who is now known as the most calm but sharp figure in observing, finally broke the silence. In an exclusive chat session in LA, he not only shared the atmosphere of the reunion, but also revealed that Jungkook had contacted the members before the show began. What are you talking about? Why is it that the conversation is said to be so sensitive that it makes the atmosphere change? And the most curious thing, is Taeyong really the main reason for Jungkook's absence? It all started with a text message RM received a few hours before the reunion. The message came from Jungkook, but it wasn't simple news. RM, who usually maintains the privacy of members, even looks at his cell phone screen longer than usual, like he is considering something. Jimin, who was sitting next to him, had a glance, and from his expression, it was clear that the message carried a burden that was not kidding. But none of them openly talked about the content of the message, at least not at the time. The reunion night went without the presence of the Golden Magne. At first, the members tried to break the ice, joke around, and remember each other's hard times they had gone through together. However, there were moments where their gazes accidentally met and silence suddenly filled the room. As if there was something unspoken, something too heavy to talk about in the midst of laughter, until finally, a few days after the reunion, Jin decided to open a little curtain that covered this mystery. In an interview originally planned to talk about his solo project, Jin alluded to that moment in LA. He said that Jungkook did get in touch with all the members through a group call. During the call, Jungkook talked about something that left the whole room speechless. Jin did not mention the details clearly, but he gave clues that made everyone wonder. Sometimes, there are things you have to say even though you know it will change everything, Jin said with a look that was difficult to decipher. Jungkook knew that, and he chose to keep telling us all. I guess that's why he didn't come. He didn't want the atmosphere to change in front of the camera. Jin's words immediately sparked a wave of speculation among the army. What could be so sensitive as to make Jungkook feel the need to talk about it, but also decide not to attend? Why is Taeyong's name the center of gossip? Some fans began to dig back into the last interaction between Jungkook and Taeyong at a public event. Some say that their gaze last time looked stiff, even cold. There are also those who remember that Taeyong once uttered a vague phrase on a live broadcast that now sounds like a hint. What further corroborates the conjecture is Jin's subsequent statement. He said the conversation concerned relationships that don't work the way they used to, and that honesty sometimes hurts more than silence. It didn't take long before fans started linking this to Jungkook and Taeyong's interactions. Moreover, in the past they were both known as a duo that was always familiar and full of laughter. However, behind all the rumors and theories, there is one thing that makes this story even more emotional. Jin admitted that he was worried about the next meeting between the two. They are both my brothers, he said softly. I just hope, when the time comes, they can sit down together and talk without hiding anything. The question now is no longer just why Jungkook wasn't at the LA reunion, but also what exactly happened between him and Taeyong to the point that it took such courage to talk about it in front of all the members. Is it about a long-buried misunderstanding? Or is there a big decision involving the future of BTS? Jin closed the conversation with a sentence that made the atmosphere quiet in the interview room. The truth always finds its way, he said quietly. And when that happens, you'll understand why that night in LA was different. Since that statement, army around the world continue to seek answers. The old videos are dismantled again, the small interactions are reanalyzed, and every word of the members now sounds to have a hidden meaning. But one thing is certain, That reunion night in Los Angeles will always be remembered not for who attended, but rather for who chose not to come, and the reasons behind it. The Los Angeles sky that night did seem beautiful, but to BTS, it was like it was covered in low-hanging clouds. This reunion was supposed to be one of those moments they've been looking forward to, a chance to get together after hectic schedules, exhausting solo projects, and growing distance between them. However, the presence of 7 seats in the room was not all filled. The seat that Jungkook was supposed to occupy remained empty, and no one really answered the big question that hung around. Why? Everything seems normal on the surface. RM tries to start the conversation with a joke. Suga sits casually playing with his phone. Jimin occasionally chuckles, and J-Hope, although looking a little tired, tries to keep the atmosphere alive. Taeyong? He sat somewhat at the end, looking towards the door occasionally, like he was waiting for someone. No one mentioned Jungkook's name directly at the beginning, as if they all agreed to let the silence speak. However, as Jin later revealed, the reality is much more complicated. A few hours before the reunion began, they all received a message from Jungkook in BTS's private chat group. The message was not long, but full of meaning. Its content, according to Jin, is something that not everyone is ready to hear. The message even made RM silent for a long time before replying, and made Jimin only type one short sentence that was difficult to interpret. Jungkook wrote that he couldn't attend because he had things to say first, things about himself, his feelings, and his relationship with one of the members. He said that if he was present without saying it, he would feel hypocritical. And that's where Taeyong's name is mentioned. Jungkook wrote that he felt a distance growing between the two of them, a distance he never fully understood, but enough to make him feel like a stranger in the middle of his own group. What makes the message so sensitive is that Jungkook alludes to certain moments that happen backstage and off, camera moments that, he says, are slowly building a wall between him and Taeyong. He even wrote, "I don't know if it's my fault, or if I'm expecting too much, but I feel like we're not seeing each other the way we used to." When Jin read that passage, he claimed to immediately feel a void in his chest. For him, Jungkook and Taeyong are two people who have always had a special bond, not just as group mates, but as friends who understand each other even though they don't always put it into words. Now, hearing Jungkook speak as if the bond is fragile, Jin knows this is not a problem to be taken lightly. The LA reunion, things got tense when someone, it's not clear who started it, mentioned that Jungkook had tried to contact Taeyong in person before sending the group a message. However, the call was not picked up. No one knows for sure why. Is Taeyong busy? Or did he choose not to answer? To be sure, when this topic began to point in that direction, everyone's gaze involuntarily turned towards Taeyong. She just smiled slightly and said, "I'll talk to him later." This is not a good time. The sentence sounds simple, but it raises even more questions in the heads of the members, and of course in the minds of the fans who now know pieces of the story. Jin admitted that after the reunion was over, he sat alone on the hotel balcony, thinking about all the things he said and did not say that night. He thought about how Jungkook felt, how Taeyong reacted, and how this might affect them as a group. You will not understand the weight of being between two people you care about who are trying to understand the distance between them, he said. The next day, Jin finally decides to contact Jungkook. The conversation was not long, but full of frankness. Jungkook said that he didn't want to talk about the issue in front of the cameras or amid the supposedly happy atmosphere of the reunion. He wants all the members to know first before he takes the next step. Whether it's repairing his relationship with Taeyong or, more surprisingly, taking some distance for a while. This part made a lot of ARMY surprised when Jin revealed it. The words, "taking some distance," immediately sparked speculation that Jungkook might be considering a break from certain interactions in the group to calm his mind. And if it does, it will be one of the most emotional moments in BTS history since their debut. Jin, who was in a small cafe in West Hollywood, sat staring at a cup of coffee that began to lose heat. In front of him, a journalist who initially only intended to ask about his music project fell silent, waiting for Jin to continue his hanging sentence. Jin knew his previous words had provoked a curiosity that was difficult to stop. And at that point, he decided to no longer just give vague clues. At least part of his story had to be revealed. Jungkook contacted us before the reunion. That you already know, he said slowly. But what you probably don't know is, he also contacted us one by one. The group message was not the first. The journalist frowned slightly. You mean, he's already tried talking to each member in private? Jin nodded. Yes. But not all conversations went as he expected. Some call directly, some just send a message. I'm the one he called. And that's where he started talking about Taeyong. Jin's tone of voice was low, as if afraid that the person at the next table would hear. He said, he feels like what they used to have has changed. Not because of a big fight, but because of a series of small moments that accumulate. She said, Hyung, I don't want to pretend that everything is okay if I don't really understand why he's moving away. According to Jin, Jungkook said it in a voice that sounded like he was holding his breath. There's a mix of confusion, sadness, and a little frustration. He also said he was afraid that if this problem was left unchecked, it would eventually affect the group. And he doesn't want that to happen. When Jin delivered this part, his eyes were dreamy. It was as if he was returning to the moment when he heard Jungkook's voice on the phone that night. I knew he was serious because his voice was trembling. And you know Jungkook, he rarely lets anyone hear him falter. The journalist tried to ask a more specific question, but Jin only smiled slightly. The details are too personal. But all I can say is, there was one incident before the reunion that brought it all to a head. And this is the part that makes the atmosphere tense, both in the room and in the hearts of the fans who heard his story later. Jin hints that the incident took place in Seoul, just weeks before the reunion. At that time, all members were present for an internal meeting with HYBE management. After the meeting was over, there was a moment when only Jungkook and Taeyong were left in the meeting room. No one knew for sure what was going on inside, but when the two came out, their expressions were completely different. Jungkook seemed to be holding back something, not anger, but some kind of pain he wanted to hide. While Taeyong, while still smiling while greeting the staff, his eyes looked distant, like he was thinking about something heavy. That night, according to Jin, Jungkook texted him, Hyung, I'm not sure he wants to talk to me anymore. Since that incident, their interactions in public have become less frequent. They're still caught on camera together, but the warmth that once felt natural is now forced to appear. The observant army began to wonder.